we're back.
And we're back.
And that was the first time doing that.
So the book that we read this month is Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events.
To go along with our podcast name of The World is Quiet Here.
Which is a tribute to this series of books. Correct me. I only have read this book.
Correct me.
If I'm wrong. Well, I mean, often I am.
That is true. You are often.
We don't have to say wrong. We could just say
So I've read this book many times before, and this morning Kevin was like, what was the name of that book? And I was like, didn't you read it last week?
I mean, I know A Series of Unfortunate Events. I just couldn't remember the name of the first book, which is
just The Bad Beginning.
The Bad Beginning. We can do a close-up of that. Main close-up.
Burr, 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 burr.
It's all probably all blurry.
Burr, 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 burr.
The art in the book is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Brett Helquist, I think is his name. He's amazing. I really think that his artwork is a huge reason why I love the books.
So, if you haven't read the book or watched the TV series, and the TV series is similar but very different. The movie was probably even worse.
Not worse. I don't. They both have, different shortcomings and.
So Lemony Snicket is a pen name of Daniel.
No, Lemony Snicket. Did you read the book? Lemony Snicket.
It's a fictional character.
He's not a fictional character, but he writes books and then he gives them to Daniel Handler, and Daniel Handler publishes them under Lemony Snicket's name.
Is that really? What I read on Wikipedia says differently.
I believe that the story of the Baudelaire children are true. It takes place in another universe. And I refuse to back down on that because I made a promise to Lemony Snicket and the Baudelaire children that I would do everything in my power to tell the story of the Baudelaires.
Cool. And Pam actually really wants to do a stop motion version of Lemony Snicket, which I think would be pretty cool.
Well, yes, because a live action version of Lemony Snicket is the dumbest thing in the world. Nothing in Lemony Snicket's world makes sense to be live action because it can't take place in our world. There's a baby that is the size of a bagel. And in the shows, the baby is not the size of a bagel.
It's pretty regular baby size.
In the 9th book, she literally sleeps in a casserole dish.
Wow. Thanks for the spoilers. Yeah, I mean, at least they got the biting thing right with Sunny, the youngest of the Baudelaire children.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, I mean, all the Baudelaire children are protagonists, but I like how, so the eldest, which is Violet, she's an engineer, which is pretty cool, idea to have a protagonist, female, because maybe in the past, stereotypically, men have been the engineer, and then Klaus, who's the next one under, pretty close in age, is a big bookworm, and but it's kind of a combination of all their talents that really get them out of.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, each character in the book series, has something specific to them, and that either helps them or hinders them as they go through. Usually for adults it hinders them, and for children it helps them.
So I like her inventions of like trying to rescue Sonny, who's stuck in a bird cage hanging out the tower at Count Olaf's. It's not quite dilapidated, but it's on the verge of like collapsing.
It's pretty bad,
Yeah,
I would say. I mean, they sleep on a floor bed, which
it's a little close to home. Right now.
But I honestly think that because I read these books when I was younger, it's helping me get through the portion of our lives where we sleep on a floor bed.
Yeah. Yeah, we sleep on a floor bed. Working for Vail Resorts has had its challenges.
So yeah, what specifically about this book do you want to discuss?
Well, so thinking of making a grappling hook, it brought back some memories between Alex and I when we were in our early 20s. He had a couple grappling hooks. We were really bored. We found this cement square hole, and we decided to venture down it. And by we, I mean Alex did, and I was there as like moral support. But he had actually two grappling hooks. One that looked like it was welded together in shop class, looked really shoddy, but like your traditional 3 hooks. And the other one looked like an industrial one, like, but each was just connected to a rope. And so Alex climbed down there just with the rope, and I guess the walls were really icy at the time. He got down there. He started having a panic attack, and supposedly there was no oxygen down there. So he was really. So he tried to climb back up, and he was slipping. And Alex he's a pretty big guy, and I tried to kind of pull him up, but I'm not as big as Alex, and so I actually had to run away from him, and we were recording it at the time, so it's mostly just audio because it was night, and I ran to the gas station and had them call 911, and some firefighters came and put down an actual ladder, rope ladder down there, and he was able to get out, but I guess it was, we think it was like a septic tank, and or some sort of thing, but Alex was like, well, why didn't you try to pull me up? And I was like, if I try to pull you up, there's a chance I could slip in, and then we're both in trouble. It's better for me to just
abandon you.
No, I mean, I think I did the best decision. We both survived. So.
I want you to know that I love you so much, but I asked, so what specifically do you want to discuss about this book? And you just told me like a 10-minute story.
Sorry, we have our quota. We've got 50 more minutes to fill.
Right. Oh my god, I really do love you.
So, I love you too, babe. I admire your patience with me. So there's some things in the book that I really like. Talking about the definition of words.
Yeah. So the thing that I love about Lemony Snicket is that he doesn't speak down to, but he will tell you the definition of words. And it's also quirky. Like, one of my favorite ones is when he's describing their dinner, and it's boiled potatoes, boiled chicken, and blanched, a word which here means boiled green beans. So you're learning a new word, but you're also laughing because it's not just repeating the same exact word, it's giving you a synonym. You'd think I'd be better at English after having read these books, but...
Oh, yeah.
But I also learned words in these books that I never would have known had I not read them. Like, well, I don't know if that's in this one.
I think he also goes in the improper use of words. So Count Olaf, he says that at times he can be, what was it? Reserved? No, not reserved. It was. You writing something?
I just wrote a heart.
Oh, okay.
But it's fine. It wasn't needed to be pointed out.
It wasn't. Not. He. Oh, I should have looked up the word. I read it last week.
Yep, and I read it like 10 times 4 years ago.
He says like, he gives a word that, it's like right after he comes back and he's nice, but he has his scheme for getting married. I think it's this chapter right here.
Standoffish?
Yeah, standoffish. Okay. So he's like, Count Olaf is like, at times I can be a bit standoffish. And then I think Klaus and Violet are both like kind of, they're laughing inside their head, but not audibly laughing because they know that Count Olaf, you know, he hasn't been standoffish. He like slapped Klaus.
Yeah.
And picked up Sunny and like was holding her up in the air in a menacing fashion.
That's what I think never gets translated to the screen when they do this, is just how awful Count Olaf is. I mean, he's sort of like quirkily inept in the film and the television show. He's a little bit worse in the television show, but in the book, he's freaking terrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they do that because it's like you need more. Like, I like Neil Patrick Harris's rendition of Olaf because, and even a little bit of Jim Carrey's version because it helps kind of lighten the mood a little bit because he's a tall.
But I don't think the mood needs to be lightened. That's why I love these books, because they don't try to lighten the mood. It tells you in the beginning it's not a happy story, and it's not.
But it does have some.
And I think it works better when Count Olaf is really, really menacing. For the first at least 2 to 3 books, he's really, really menacing. And then after that, it sort of starts to get blurred a little bit more. But you'll see that.
Yeah. Do you think the writer has something against actors? 'Cause the whole troupe is like pretty terrible, and the hook. I mean, even in like the TV series, I don't really remember if the movies had the hook, the actor with the 2 hook hands.
Yeah.
But in the TV series, he's more goofy, but in the book, he's freaking terrifying. I mean.
Well, yeah, and I think it really takes away from the series when they telegraph things like that. But you don't know what that means yet. So let's just focus on the first book, I guess.
Okay.
We should just do a month where you pop all of these out and I reread them, and then we talk about all of them.
How about we do one off, so we read another book and then read a Snicket book and then read another book. I don't want to get burned out, and I don't want to.
I just think that the whole scope of it, I mean, like, we can talk about this, but then when we bring in the series and we're talking about that, there are things you don't know yet.
Oh, so let's kind of maybe give the general premise of what happens in this book. I don't know how much deviates from the TV series and movies, but
The TV series actually kept pretty close to the first book. It starts off with the Baudelaires being told that their parents have died in a terrible fire, and they have to go and live with someone else. Now, I think that the mystery really starts off when they have no idea who they're going to live with. Like, basically their parents' will said that they need to be raised in the most convenient way possible. And that's, that gets you started off asking questions. The Baudelaires have really good memories of their parents, but they seem to know absolutely nothing about them. And they talk in the beginning of this book about these parties that their parents have, where people come and they really appreciate that their parents let them stay and listen to conversations and have conversations. But then they're sent to live with someone who's never been to one of those parties before.
yeah.
It's really...
But that's kind of, isn't that kind of to show that Poe is a little bit inept as well? No?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Poe certainly is awful. But it's supposed to be the most convenient way, and he's the closest relative living in the city, I suppose.
But is even Count Olaf a relative? Because the fact that he's an actor makes you...
No, but I don't think anyone is a relative to them who they go and live with.
Oh, okay.
Like, they call Uncle Monty Uncle Monty. I don't think he's their uncle. They call Aunt Josephine, but I don't think she's their aunt. And then after that, they stop, putting up things like that. But they were all part of an organization together, so they are close.
So, I like in the bit, so, you, at first, Count Olaf is really mean to them, gives them lots of chores. Their neighbor is a judge, Judge Strauss. Is it Strauss? Justice Strauss. And she seems like an absolute lovely lady. And it kind of, in your mind, you think it's going to be kind of like a Matilda like setup where
They'll end up overthrowing Count Olaf, and
she'll adopt them, and they'll be able to explore her wonderful library, and it seems like just a really beautiful house, a really nice lady, wonderful garden, this whole thing. But that's definitely not the case. And towards the end, it's like reminds you like, hey, this is not a happy story. This is they're not gonna go live with Strauss. But but then Count Olaf is suddenly super nice to them, and like, I want you to participate in my play because I want you to feel more part of the family with my troop family. And they're like, something's up. This guy is, he made us oatmeal with raspberries. That's pretty decadent for a pretty Scrooge-like. Because in my mind, I think of like Scrooge, but like over dramatized. I don't know. It's like Count Olaf is his own dealio, but yeah. So the play is that it's a marriage play between Count Olaf and Violet, and Violet is the oldest of the Baudelaires, so she'll be the first to have the money. You find out it's like actually a real marriage ceremony, and so the Baudelaires are able to borrow a copy of what is it? I can't
Nuptial?
Nuptial law. Um, and that's actually one of my favorite parts in the book is Klaus, who is the major bookworm. I mean, they all enjoy reading. He's like, staying up late at night, reading through a law book. And in the book it says, nobody enjoys law books. It's just there to, you read them so that you can be rewarded with a good career or something like that, which is funny because my grandpa and my great-grandpa were semi-famous lawyers in Chicago. And I wonder if they did actually enjoy books on law, or if they just loved reading so much that they could just get through it. But yeah, it talks about late at night at the very end, he's desperate to find out what's going on, and and in the book it says he was so tired that he found himself reading the same sentence again, and then right underneath that it says he's so tired that he found himself reading the same sentence again, and it had it 3 times in there. And after I read it the second time, I was like, wait, what? Am I tired now? And it's little
so
things
pure.
like, yeah, it was funny. So I thought little bits like that were really clever, which makes me excited to read the other books.
Yeah, well, they're really, they're sarcastic, and they're, layered, and all sorts of different things that really, like, when you first look at it, I mean, it's like a children's book, right? But it's really
But is it
so much
layered
more
like
than
a
that.
cake, or is it layered like an onion?
It's layered like a lasagna.
Nice.
Like 50-pound lasagna they serve at preparatory school.
So what else? Them talking about so Olaf, left them some money to make dinner, and Olaf didn't specify what he wanted for dinner, and so the kids go over to Judge Strauss's house,
Justice
Strauss, and they get a cooking book and figure out that they're gonna make
pasta puttanesca.
just like the Russian dictator. And when they're talking about making it, it actually made me hungry.
Yeah, there's usually some sort of food product in each book that is mentioned or specified. They also make pudding.
Not in this book, though, right?
Yeah, they do.
Did it? Oh, okay.
They totally make pudding.
Okay, I guess I was too focused on the pasta.
Yeah, and that's right before Count Olaf threatens them, and I think slaps Klaus. I think that's that part.
And it was because they didn't make roast beef.
Well, yeah, it's because Klaus is super, idiotic about it. I mean, I love Klaus. I get that he is in a situation that he doesn't want to be in, but the first book, he's really, really pouty. And
Well, his parents died. I guess
Violet's parents also died. I'm just saying, it definitely shows the different ways that you deal with things.
He's not being pouty.
Through the different ways that they deal with things. But he, like, there's so many times where when I reread the first book, I'm like, if you had just played this a little bit different. I know you're 12, but, like, fuck it. Figure it out.
He showed all his cards, like...
He showed all his cards.
When he's like, I read a book on nuptial law, and I found out you're actually trying to marry Violet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he, like, goes down early in the morning, and then they lose Sunny. Or he stole Sunny overnight, I guess, while class was reading.
No, I thought it was... He had, like, since he had his radio, he was able to hear, or something, like, him basically explaining to Olaf, like, hey, I caught what you're doing. Olaf's like, oh, okay, well, my troop member now has got Sonny captive, and...
Oh.
And in that sense, Klaus was not the brightest.
Well, yeah, but I do appreciate that their first attempts at things don't work, and they have to come up with another solution, which is really quite simple. I'm not sure it would hold up in a court of law.
Yeah, especially that whole thing of, instead of Violet signing with her right hand, she signs with her left hand.
Well, yeah, that's the way they get out of it, because it wasn't her own hand.
Yeah, but it's still technically her own hand. Yeah, it's still her hand. So
that's, I think, the biggest flaw in the first book, and I don't think they've fixed it in the shows.
I thought she was gonna sign somebody else's name or something.
Yeah, I really think that if she'd signed someone else's name, maybe still with her left hand, because I do like that they foreshadow that in the beginning by when he's giving the descriptions of them. He just offhandedly mentions that, like most young girls, Violet is right-handed because she's not a spawn of Satan.
My mom is left-handed, so...
I'm sorry to reveal it to you this way. That's just how it is.
And it was just talking about her skipping the rocks, and that's just...
Yeah, and how she she could skip them farther with her right hand because she was right-handed. And then it comes up later in that she signs with her left hand, and that absolves them of this situation. The document is then destroyed anyway, but...
Yeah. Count Olaf gets away. Mm-hmm. Along with his ragtag team.
I think just the bumbling idiocy of the adults is really,
Even Justice Strauss, who's the most, I feel like, intellectual adult in the series, she's...
Well, I think the series does a really good job of showing that good-heartedness and good intentions does not mean that you are good at doing things. Like, you have to actually take actions to change things. You can't just have good intentions and want good things to happen. Like, honestly, Justice Strauss, as much as I love her, is just a really, really bad person. Like, she's watching them live with this man who abuses them all the time, and she doesn't seem to, like, she goes with them to the market to get this food, and they're like, yeah, we're cooking dinner for Count Olaf, and she's like, oh, that's strange, and, like, doesn't really ask any more questions, and it's like...
I mean, I don't think it's, like,
wow, you really dropped the ball.
I don't think it's terribly bad that kids cook, you know. I remember cooking
But
as
it's
a
a
kid.
lot different cooking. And see, the thing is, she doesn't ask any more questions. Like, if you look at it at face value, kids cooking for their, what is it? Guardian is not, really?
Sorry, I had to show off my belly button.
Is not bad. But if she were to ask any more questions, or the fact that they have to go and get all the ingredients by themselves,
Yeah, that
they
does
don't
seem a
even
little
know
bit...
what to cook. They have to find a cookbook.
Yeah.
And they're cooking it themselves with Sunny, who is an infant. Like,
I think this would have been more passing if it were like in the 1910s or something like that, when it's like,
well,
okay,
that's
you're
sort
old
of,
enough to work in the coal mine, you know, but
it is sort of, that's when the story takes place, I suppose. But it's also, she should have asked more questions.
yeah. Yeah. Trying to think of what other characters. Oh, Poe, when they go, and after Klaus has been slapped, they go, and Poe didn't even give them an address or the name of the bank that he works at, and so these kids are walking around all around town looking for Poe. And they went to like 4 or 5 different banks or something like that before finding the one. And then they go and they're talking to him, and he's like, throughout it, he's constantly getting pulled away for these phone calls, where he's like saying kind of arbitrary numbers, and
Yeah.
which is kind of a good idea. Like I feel like a lot of adults and parents are pretty bad about that, where they're, kids are talking to him, but they are not.
They're focused on something else.
Yeah, they're focused on something else that they think is more important, and that these.
It's almost like my managers at work, where you'll ask them to help you with something, and then they get a call, and they just completely ignore you to figure out the call, because if they miss one call, their whole life is going to be derailed.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it does seem that way, but...
I mean, training. It's one of those things that initially it costs money and time, but it's one of those things that it's like pays off, because then you have a competent employee, and then when you don't train them, and then you yell at them for not knowing their job. Sorry, I'm just venting about work a little bit. And then when you yell back at them about getting some training, and then you start doing your job well, and then they compliment you on how you're doing your job properly, and you want to be like, well, you should train your employees. But that's rough when you're understaffed, and that often is the case. Like, a lot of companies, like, they have just enough man hours to take care of the daily tasks, and no extra amount of time allotted for taking in that training. I mean, that's why you preferably start the training before the season starts. But.
Cool story, bro.
Yeah, sorry, going off on work tangents and venting, but.
So yeah, anything else?
Trying to think. The constant talking about the eye design that Olaf has got. A tattoo on his ankle, which is actually a tattoo Pam wants to get.
You're totally blowing my cover.
I mean, she doesn't want to get it. But yeah, it's on his ankle. It's also decorations in their room and in the main living room area. And it talks about
Count Olaf is obsessed with eyes and the eye,
and isn't that's like a kind of a tip of the hat to the stonemasons, like a lot of secret societies that have that,
because it's like you're always being watched.
yeah, Big Brother.
Yeah, I think the little tips to what is actually going on here, like how they talk about the eye, they've never seen the eye before, but both of their parents have it. So I'm not exactly sure how that works.
The tattoo on the
Yeah.
ankle. Well, I assume in the olden days, it's like you're always covered up. Like
This doesn't take place in the olden days, babe.
Oh, okay. I thought you said
It
it
takes
was.
place in another universe,
Okay.
but things are sort of more old-timey there.
So yeah, so if it's style wise, then people don't really show their.
Yeah, but if they
legs
were,
or-
like, they talk about going to the beach in the beginning, you would think that an ankle would be out at some point.
Have you seen the beach outfits for the
Or,
1910s?
When they're changing for bed, I mean, it's not like it's their, like, nurse or, like, their aunt or something. It's their parents. But they also mention, as they're driving through town, that they drive past the ruins of the botanical gardens because those were burned down. So you know that there's more than one mysterious fire that has taken place. Well, perhaps not mysterious. You just know that there's another fire that's taken place. But certainly the Baudelaire house fire is very mysterious.
Trying to think of anything else. Does each book take place within a year or a week or
That I'm not sure of, but that's something I don't like in the show, that it really takes place over the course of like a day or two, when clearly in the books it is happening over weeks or months or some sort of timeline that's longer than a day. And I don't like that in the show. I think it moves them around too quickly. Then you're like, oh wait, it's one of their birthdays. I mean, by the
It's better than the movie, because in the movie, didn't they did like 4 different moves or something all in the same movie, and it just felt really
yeah, but I don't
rushed.
think it was in the same day.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I feel like there were time jumps that made it feel like they had been there for a certain amount of time before Olaf showed up. But still not long enough, I don't think. But yeah, I would say that this book probably takes course over like 2 weeks to a month because he really wants that money. They're doing all of this manual labor. They're sleeping on the floor. I think they would be a lot more frazzled if it had been a much longer period of time. But then again, we have a floor bed and we've basically just
Yeah, and wasn't it the bed that they were given was not comfortable enough, and they had to use
I think
the
they
curtains?
Yeah, they like switch off sleeping on the bed and the floor, and then Sunny sleeps in curtains and clothing because she is an infant and needs a crib.
I like that Sunny has a language that Klaus and Violet can understand. Where some of the words are English, I think there's like one word that she's.
Well, supposedly anyone could understand what she's saying if they listened. I mean, Lemony Snicket knows what she's saying at any given point in time, but the adults around her just think it's baby talk. Like, they don't understand that she is attempting to convey specific things.
So, back to the idea of doing stop motion animation of it. I could see like the sets and the houses, like.
I think it would be perfect because it's like a lot of stop motion has that sort of like gothic antique feel because things aren't perfect because they're like miniatures and they're really difficult to move around, so you have to get like these different sorts of
Yeah, I mean, that
Like,
is...
it's an uncanny valley type thing.
Yeah.
Where you sort of, like, do something different.
Yeah, I can understand that with stop motion. The cool thing about stop motion is that you can use regular objects, and stop motion has so much texture to it. And then usually most stop motions, they really like the characters, or their design and look is really...
And I mean, that thing that I said about this taking place in another universe isn't something that Daniel Handler or Lemony Snicket have ever said. But that's my philosophy on the books. I don't think that by doing I think that by doing a live action version, you're doing a real disservice to it. Because the things that happen in the book, first of all, they're being told through Lemony Snicket's eyes. It's not necessarily what actually happened. But at the same time, I think that taking it at face value is more fun. And by moving it into the real world, you can't really do that. Because, like, if I see Violet, Klaus, and Sunny walking down the street and they're human, like, I can see them, they look like kids to me, it takes away the whimsicalness of some of the things that happen in the book. It's like you have to take it away because, like, building a
I have to
giant
say that creating...
hot air balloon doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't be able to float. The hot air balloon in the show pisses me the fuck off.
Well, yeah, and it seems like that's something that you should do with canvas, and something that, like, where you've just got a lot of these really cool textures.
It shouldn't be CGI, yeah. It should be really, really textured, and it should look whimsical.
And feel off, too. And that's something
and
that...
feel just not right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's stop motion is really good at that. I mean, there's some...
And, like, if you look at it in the way that you aren't even taking it at face value, like, this is Lemony Snicket's version of what happened, and he is a writer, so he really exaggerates things and sort of, you know, lies about things, but he's not, like, he doesn't realize that he's lying about them. He's just telling this story, and he's so wrapped up in it that he's not a reliable narrator. Then...
I didn't get that feeling from him in the first book, but is later on, do you...
I'm just saying, like, the series overall,
Okay.
sort of, like, he starts to put more about what his life is like in it and things like that. And when you look at it, like, I take it at face value, totally. But if you look at it as he's not a reliable narrator, and some of these things that he's talking about don't happen the exact way that he's talking about them, then it makes sense for it to be showcased in a world that doesn't really make sense to us. Like, that's what I was trying to say when I was like, if I look at Violet, Klaus, and Sunny and they look like kids to me, then I don't really believe it when they're, like, working in a sawmill and Sunny is using her teeth to scrape the bark off the wood. Like, it doesn't make sense. And the CGI in the show is absolutely horrendous.
CGI is usually...
The CGI in the show doesn't make it seem whimsical, and, like, it doesn't make your brain go, oh, like, that's a weird thing that wouldn't happen in our world. It makes you go, oh, no. No.
So...
And when we get to the Vile Village, I'm just gonna go off about how there were, like, 10 birds in that fucking town, but it's fine.
Okay, it's a sensitive subject.
It's supposed to be covered in birds, and there are 10 of them, and they're all fake and CGI and terrible.
I think there was 20.
If you're gonna do fake CGI and terrible, they should be on literally everything.
Yeah. I just have to say, if we do stop motion of this, creating the armature for Sunny is going to be really difficult, being that small.
Sucks to suck.
Or unless we make her of size and then green screen her in.
Okay. So yeah, any other thoughts on
I'm excited to read the other ones. But for our next podcast, we should be covering, what is it, the
Either
portrait of
Yeah, of Dorian Gray.
Portrait of Dorian Gray, or Trevor Noah's book of a crime. What is it?
Born a Crime.
Born a Crime. And Born a Crime is the tiny bit that I've read so far. Well, Trevor Noah is the new host for The Daily Show. Has actually done a really great job at filling in the shoes for Jon Stewart, and I have a special love for that show, not just because it's great at informing you about different subjects in a really funny fashion in a very clever way, but my grandma, when she's still alive, she used to watch the news every day and take notes, and she got to a point where watching the news was causing her to have her heart rate to go up too high, and I know it was really important for her because grandma, she had her wits about her till her very last day, so instead she would watch The Daily Show, and she could still get the same information, but in a way that was a little more palatable, and so I just, but Born a Crime. Trevor Noah is from South Africa, and I don't know the ethnicity of his mom or his dad. Get that far, but
He said his mother was from the same tribe as Nelson Mandela.
oh yeah,
His
Zio
is white.
or XOU or something. But
We're
we won't
gonna
go
have
into
to look
that.
it up
But
before we do
but there's
next
the
podcast, but-
the Immorality Act, which saying that people from two ethnicities cannot procreate or fornicate,
Yeah.
period, with each other, and being a mixed child, he's part of that. So so that's gonna be. I'm really excited to read that book because it's gonna have some really some good insight into the apartheid and also his life experiences, and so you're giving me this look like I'm great. I'm just, not that any of that stuff is good, but it's something
it's
that
not, babe.
we take for granted, like being here in the U.S. of
Okay,
this
so
thing.
before we go,
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to say that I appreciate that you read this book and you liked it, because I think before you read this book and sort of liked it a little bit, right? You did?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
What, before I read it, I mean, I like the
No,
TV
before
series.
you read this book, which you did like, right?
Yeah, I did. No, I do like it.
I think that you were a little bit concerned about my unhealthy obsession with it. But I think that by walking you through these books, you will understand why I have dedicated my life to the Baudelaire orphans.
Okay. I mean, I really do like the book. And also part of the reason why I don't want to read all the books at once is that, I feel like I need to digest it properly.
I just think that, like, I have a lot of thoughts, and it's hard to keep... I mean, I went off on that little tangent about the Vile Village and how that was portrayed. So I just have a lot of thoughts, so it's hard for me to, like, be like, all right, back to the first book, back to just the first book and the first parts of the adaptations and all of that.
Because it should be considered all as one story.
Well, yeah, just because, like, the things that are out there already have an influence on how I see things in them, and then, like, the first book really is just the bad beginning. There's so much more, you know. And the first book sort of starts to give you little hints of those things, but it's such a deeper world that it's hard to just take the first book and only talk about that, because there's so much else going on that if you're only focusing on the first book, you have to ignore, because that doesn't exist yet.
So that must be extremely difficult for you.
Yeah, and since I've read the books like 4 or 5 times, and I took, do you know this? I took intricate notes on all of the books. And I've also written screenplays for all of the books. So it's,
I mean, that's cool. That's awesome.
it's a lot. I have a lot of baggage that goes.
Yeah, I got a little hint of that, but I really truly admire your passion, and I'm really glad that it is actually a really great book, and that I'm gonna start seeing that. If it was, I'm trying to think of a bad book, but I can't think of
Twilight.
Yeah, if it was Twilight, it would be a little bit difficult. Not anything super against Twilight, but
Or The Hunger Games.
I still want to read The Hunger Games.
We should read The Hunger Games. I will
Rip
have
it apart.
so many thoughts.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would be game for that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
right.
So thanks for listening to us talk about the bad beginning and Kevin talk about his life and all sorts of other things. And I hope you come back next time.
yeah.